Of course, thank you. I will share. It still says you, there you go. Get it on the screen. Okay. Can you see it okay?
Yeah, it looks great, Sophia. Thank you.
Good. Okay. So as John said, I'm Sophia Farmer. I'm the VTSS implementation specialist out of the Virginia SPDIG. Our project is MTSS, or Virginia's version, which is for the Virginia Tiered Systems of Support. And we've added a few pieces, or working very hard towards alignment. So a lot of the data questions that you'll see that we have speak to how we're documenting that work, or that alignment work. And I convinced Corinne Wilson to come play with me, or play with us today. She's one of our evaluators on the team and our data diva for Virginia. So, hi, Corinne.
Hi, everyone.
And we really are hoping that in the true spirit of community of practice that you guys will have some ideas for us, some ways we can make our data collection better or easier or more informative to the work we're doing, based on what you've done or seen or had experience in or resources with. So please chime in. And with my screens, John, you'll monitor the chat box. I guess I won't be able to see.
I will, although so
Okay.
that you know, Sophia, you can go ahead and put the group chat up also, and that doesn't get shared through.
Okay. Oh, okay, good.
So you can watch it, but I'm happy to help watch it in the background and point out anything that comes up.
Okay, thanks. So we'll go ahead and get started. What we hope to do today is to share some of our critical pieces of data, particularly around our VTSS event log and how we're capturing what the coaches are doing in the various LEAs, and then demonstrate how we use the other data that we collect to inform our professional learning scope and sequence and follow-up coaching activities. And like I just said, hopefully get any ideas from you about how we can make this better, easier. And you'll see in certain places that I've listed certain challenges that we've been struggling with or trying to problem solve around, and hope that you have some good ideas for us that we can take back. So we'll start with our VTSS event log, what we're calling an event log, versus a coaching log, because right now what it is doing is tracking our implementation activities. So to give you a little bit of a context, let me go back here for a second. To give you a little bit of a context, Virginia has roughly 40 VTSS systems coaches, and that sounds like a lot, but of those, only 2 of them are full-time FTEs. The rest range anywhere from about half-time to 3/4-time FTEs, so or part-time equivalent. So the 2 full-time coaches and roughly 10 of the others are hired through my center, which is the VTSS Research and Implementation Center, or a centralized place, the VTSS RIC. And those are the folks over whom we have direct personnel supervision. The others are all hired through what we call regional TTACs, or Regional Training and Technical Assistance Centers. So we don't have direct supervisory authority over them, but we are all managed through the Department of Education. And we take our direction, our priorities from them. And they developed my center, the VTSS RIC Center, to manage what we call programmatic control, or to build capacity in the coaches, to manage the scope and sequence, develop program, make sure that we're following the needs or goals of the grants, and so on. So you can see a little bit of the rub in that not only do we have the one center that kind of manages the work, we collaborate very closely with ODU, which is where Corinne is from, for our evaluation, but then we also have 5 other centers that we collaborate with to do this work. So we are all over the state doing this work, and we really needed a way to be able to consistently document what that work looked like and sounded like. So along comes the event log. The event log really allowed us to document our effort. And what we meant by that is what we are actually doing to support school divisions, not just to build the system, but to implement and sustain a tiered system model with fidelity. We also needed something that would help us to accurately track the number of initial professional learning activities versus the number of follow-up coaching activities. So while in our scope and sequence, we have a number of what we call statewide events where we provide explicit or direct instruction in the implementation of a tiered model. Those also happen upon request regionally or at a specific LEA, what we would call division, so at a specific division level as well. So we needed a way to track how many of those events were happening across the state, who was accessing them, and so on. And then we were hoping that through doing this, there were a number of questions we could answer as they come up in our statewide meetings or at our leadership meetings or at the DOE. Some of the questions we've hoped that this will help us answer are things like, does more time coaching lead to greater implementation fidelity, or does it help us get to fidelity faster? And who is it exactly that is accessing our VTSS learning and coaching? Is it the same folks over time? Is it more schools that are accessing the training? Is it different people from the same schools? In other words, how much turnover are we getting, and so on. So here's basically what it looks like. So Corinne, did you want to talk through kind of what we're capturing?
So what we have built is a system that has a unique URL for each coach. And so when they go into the URL, they can click on what we title the event log. And the event log, you can see screenshots of it here. But if you go forward to the next slide, we look at what division they're working with, what type of event it is, what day it was held. If it's a multiple day event, we ask them to put in an event for each single day so we can collect total time across multiple day events. Who's providing the service, which system coaches are working on the event, and then the real meat in terms of data that we collect comes into what phase of implementation is being used during the event. What essential component are they working on? For example, data-informed decision-making or evidence-based practices. They can always click more than one. It doesn't have to be just a single essential component or phase of implementation. We look at behavior outcomes based on tier. Are they working with school climate? Are they working on a mental health piece? Same thing, we look at academics based on type and tier. So really focusing on the literacy, reading, and the math, and also the alignment across in terms of the tiers as well. This is where we really hope to be able to connect the difference between a larger event in our scope and sequence, one of these events listed here, to all the follow-up events that are done with the divisions and or schools afterwards. So for each event, they click what scope and sequence event may have been tied or linked to the material they're working on their division or school with. So we can see the trickle-down effect and see how many follow-ups are tied with, say, the Tier 1 forum that we're holding next week. And then we do a participant list so we can know not only how many people, but ideally some of the state wanted us to be able to look at and see, does person X go to 10 events in a row, or are we touching different people throughout the state? So that's where we hope to be able to look at that whenever a question arises.
So one of the challenges we've had is, even though, as you can see on these slides, we're tracking general information such as tier 1 behavior, or they might go into a team meeting and be working on, say, attendance, and maybe they're installing or an initial implementation of some of the practices related to that. What we still weren't really capturing was what exactly that looked like or sounded like. In other words, how are we getting to a fidelity of coaching? While we've used this information, or trying to use this information, and I say that because one of our other challenges you'll see is we've been spending the last year probably cleaning up the data, meaning do all of the coaches know what we mean when we say you're working on alignment, so that when they check the box, there's a reasonably similar definition of what that is when they're working on it.
We've probably been using the event log in some shape or form for about 2 years, actually. But the first year we went through so many different iterations, things that didn't quite work for the coaches, too encumbersome, how they split out their time. We couldn't look at the first year's worth of data. We made so many changes that they just weren't comparable across the years. We're looking forward to this summer. We'll have 1 full year's of event log data that we can use to tie in with other outcomes that we're collecting from schools and divisions.
Right, so it's taking us what seems like a long time, but have actually been some really good conversations, because even in conversation around how to use the event log, we've realized there was different understandings of the work, or what they should be doing, or what that activity might look like or sound like, or what we were classifying as certain events. So it actually ended up having some good implementation questions around it as we were changing the event log. So you'll see here too, because we still weren't quite getting exactly what we're looking at in terms of fidelity of coaching, we're just looking really more at time and which events are match follow-up versus professional learning. We think one answer might be, and having them upload some sample coaching plans. And what we're attempting to do is much like I've heard from a few of you, or through the work last summer of Kim St. Martin and Karen Ward in Michigan and NERN, about developing coaching plan templates, if you will, or coaching service delivery plans, and then individualized coaching plans, meaning we have some overarching ideas of what the coaching activity should look like and sound like, but then also having them differentiate the coaching plans based on context or need. So we think that might help get to some of it. Another potential direction we're going is we've added, with this BDIG, we've had SIM before, strategic instruction model before, as a component of our reading instruction for alignment. We have not had Fusion in the past, so we've added Fusion. And we've also, as a state, rather than contracting directly with Kansas, University of Kansas, we have attempted, we're hoping, still in consultation with Kansas that handles the SIM work, and under their mentorship, if you will, building and utilizing this, building more capacity, but utilizing the state capacity we've built over several years in these training and technical assistance centers. So we're hoping also to align that documentation and coaching plans with this, so we're all in the same place. But as you've heard me mention, we're still really struggling with getting an accurate picture of what we would call fidelity of coaching, I guess, or so what is really happening during those coaching events versus the professional learning events, and do certain activities matter? Does it matter that we do things fairly consistently across coaching, or can we get to the same ends if X, Y, and Z is happening? And is there a way to capture that as one? Again, we're still talking through consistent documentation, working through questions. Corinne and her counterparts come to our implementation team meetings or our coaches meetings and help answer a lot of questions. And then buy-in. This was new for them because we were across 6 or so centers. They all really had their own way of kind of tracking what they were doing. They have one way that they do it for the state that is not related to this work or grant work. We've had different project managers for previous BDIGs who wanted documentation in other ways. So it was getting their buy-in too, because it's required a little more. So my hope is you could give us some ideas on what are ways you've been able to address some of these same challenges. How do you, if you're not with your folks all the time in these meetings, how do we get an accurate picture, and what are you doing to capture that of what's happening during those coaching events?
And as I mentioned before, sorry to interrupt, but as I mentioned before, please feel welcome to unmute your phones or your computers and speak up verbally.
Hi, this is Jennifer from Oregon. I
Hi.
can't say that we're in full implementation of this yet whatsoever, but our previous FDIG, and we work with Kansas as our evaluators, in our coaching logs, we asked for what was the coaching objective, and did you meet that objective? And then we also do our participant follow-up to give them some feedback around the coaching. And in that, it includes some of the pieces we would like to see, like, did your coach use data in the discussion? And so we're able to get that feedback from participants to share with them. And then we also have, next year especially, we'll be doing some side-by-side visits with coaches where we're partnering with them to help them meet their coaching goals. And in that, we'll be giving them feedback when at certain points along the way, along with modeling practices. So those are just a couple ideas that we've done. And we also make sure in the log that there's a clear place for them to write follow-up activities. So what will the school do, for example, before you come back next time, and what do you need to do before you come back next time?
That's great. I'm writing this down. So that's great. What will follow up be? And when you do the survey, those are pieces that you're interested, things that you said you wanted to see, so your look fors. So not
exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's the participants also get to talk about if it was helpful, or it's an opportunity for feedback to the coach to remind them, like, these are the characteristics of high quality coaching we'd like to see. And so we asked about some of those, but we also asked about some of the touchy-feely side of coaching, because we also want to know that really they're establishing that partnership relationship. And one of the things that we do, as far as, because that can be really uncomfortable, right now we're allowing the coaches to determine when they want to get that feedback. As we move forward, I think that especially, maybe not this next year where they're still doing those relationships, but the year after that, we may be saying we're going to blindly send out the survey. But right now they have control over it, so that they are comfortable getting that feedback.
Awesome. Okay.
And I can talk to Patty and Amy, our evaluators in Kansas, but I don't think they'd have a problem with us sharing our current coaching log, which we're doing some changes to, as well as the participant feedback.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you. Okay. So another area where we're taking a lot of data, as are you, for our project is around fidelity and trying to answer that question, which we think we know the answer to, but how does, not just does it impact fidelity, but how does it impact fidelity with coaching? And some of our major tools, Corinne.
I was muted. So we collect 2 instruments during mid-year, which is February for April for us. And we collect from divisions or districts the district capacity assessment, which we've adapted from NERN. It has 26 items, 3 implementation drivers across 9 subscales, and it measures the progress toward district capacity building goals around a common infrastructure to support an effective innovation, which we have replaced with specifically VTSS. So they are completing the district capacity assessment specifically with regards to VTSS. And at the end of the DCA, it creates a district capacity action plan that they reference and use throughout the year in their meetings. This is a relatively newer instrument for us. We've been using it about as long as we've had the event log, 3 years. So we are just starting to see consistent progress in the way that it's filled out and facilitated. That was new for us. So the first year and second year, we had feedback that the scores were kind of all over the place. People did a lot more self-assessment than we maybe wanted them to. And I think it went really well this mid-year. We've been looking at the data so far, and they seem to match a lot more of what the coaches indicate as actual functioning components within the divisions. From the schools, we collect the Tiered Fidelity Inventory, or TFI, if you go to the next slide. And the TFI, same time frame, February through April, 45 items across all 3 tiers, tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. And it measures fidelity of implementation specifically for the core features of school-wide PBIS. And again, at the end of completion, the schools get an action plan. We've been doing the TFI also for about 3 years, transitioning from the BOQ, but this data has been much more consistent. So we did, for the first time this year, an external fidelity review with the TFI and had some really good results. Most scores were consistent. A couple were a little bit higher, a little bit lower, but overall we feel like it's a really good tool. We just got these 2 instruments for the 2018 year, and we are ready to tie them in with the event log and see what corresponds or correlates to the number of events that were actually held in the division or the school. I think Sophia is going to talk to that more on the next slide.
Yeah. So we spend a lot of time with the coaches talking about what that data actually means. So, and we improve their learning first and foremost. So the evaluation team led by Corinne usually reports those trends across the data for DCA and TFI to our leadership team and to our what we call implementation teams, but it's the 40 or so odd coaches. The division reports are also given to individual coaching teams. They are paired in teams for coaching with each of our divisions or LEAs, and So they get an individual report on that data, as do the LEAs or the divisions. They get that reported back to them. So the coaches then take some time in our meetings, sometimes in their individual planning meetings, to develop or share activities for improving implementation. So if they're looking at certain aspects of behavior, there are certain go-to activities or things that we do, and likewise, they come up with or generate others if we're stuck. We also do that for the DCAs. We do that for the DCA at the division level and the TFI at the school level. We're still looking at measures for overall academic achievement. Our divisions use the standards of learning tests, which are given once a year and notoriously not helpful. But we played around with different academic markers, and we're still working on that alignment piece as well. We're actually getting ready to validate what we call the academic enhancements to the tiered fidelity inventory, or our academic version of a TFI, if you will. So any consistent areas for growth, so consistently low areas in the TFI or DCA, are topics for capacity building for our coaches, but also, as you see in the next column, areas for that we address in some type of professional learning, like networking opportunities, our big statewide events or regional events. We encourage them to come up in implementation plans and coaching plans so that across the state we can network as well and learn from each other. So we really use, we teach the coaches how to use that data, but really use that to drive areas of emphasis. So we do have a scope and sequence for the learning for the division, but we use those particular areas for growth to drive where we might focus or spend a little more time around, or do booster sessions around, or provide networking, like we said, or online events for them. And then we said, well, we've spent a lot of time around this idea of fidelity of implementation of coaching, a fidelity of implementation as driven by kind of the training and the coaching we do, but we haven't spent as much time around fidelity of the training. In the past, our training had been led by certain experts in the field, if we could get them, or one or two or three experts across the state. And we really started realizing that if training was going to happen regionally, as it had been, or across the state, that we needed to have some way to measure how training was being delivered, or this notion of fidelity of trainings that we're offering. So about 2 years ago, we developed what we call our training of trainers model. And it follows a basic I do, we do, you do model. If you're a follower of Anita Archer. And basically what it looks like is that our systems coaches observe PD, and they can do that one time, they can do that several times, they can do chunks of it over time, to really get a feel for what that training should look like and sound like, and how it's done, and the messaging that we want to get across, or the particular areas that are, struggle for participants, and so on. So they spend some time meeting with the presenters to debrief. Then we have a we do time period where these coaches can present with an experienced coach, depending on what's being offered either in their region or statewide. Or we spend a lot of time, actually it should be unless they don't have a regional opportunity. And we also practice, we have a monthly coaching PLC. So in that coaching PLC, we not only review the content, debrief it, but we also practice presenting it in fishbowl with each other. So give each other feedback on delivering those modules and delivering some of that content. So our hope is to build capacity across all of them so that any one of us could present for each other, and we're not reliant on one or two people or even outside experts, that we still call on them when we need them. And then the last phase is the you do. So that's new coach, if you will, or one that hasn't presented before, gets the opportunity to present and get feedback from an experienced coach. They also complete for us a reflection on the experience, and the reflection is based on, much like you've said, the survey was, and having the team reflect on how the team meetings went, but we used kind of the HQPD checklist and a few other studies we've seen to have them reflect on certain experiences in it. So we have them reflect on participant engagement. We have them reflect on comfort level with certain content areas. We have them reflect on areas where people might have been stuck, or and how they knew, what evidence did they have that there was dissonance, and so on. So we have them reflect and turn that in. And we also have them reflect on the content itself. Do you think there's part of the module that needs to be revised or tweaked? And we use that to really guide what we do next time. And as you can imagine, we've had a few challenges with that too, like any growing project. One of them being ample opportunities. With 40-some coaches, part-time or not, being able to observe, deliver professional learning, give feedback to each other. So having the time to get folks through it so that we're all in the same place. Developing accurate fidelity checklists. So really taking the time to listen to the talking points and develop those fidelity checklists that are both easy to use but comprehensive enough that we know folks are able to deliver certain trainings. And then also teaching observers and each other how to be great observers for each other, but also how to give growth-oriented feedback that'll really help us grow. And for us to feel comfortable with that as a coaching group. So those have been some areas we've continued to work on and grow. And so again, I would ask, are there any ideas that you guys have had? Do you have similar or different TOT processes? And how have you managed that data? Or are there any questions that you might have about that process or how we did it? Can we help one of you guys?
This is Oregon again. I don't want to monopolize the conversation. But I would say that we're also using the high quality professional development checklist. Mm-hmm. And I think one of our big differences is that we as a state right now have a little more control over the professional development. So far, all of the PD that we've held has been coordinated through the state. Not that we haven't had some contractors present a module, but we've had really close supervision of that. And as far as our coaches being out in the field, like I said, we've assigned them state liaisons. So we have individuals that at some point we can have used the high quality professional development checklist when they're observing their PD that they do give. Also, I would say that we do the participant feedback as well, and it's catered to each PD opportunity. And our evaluators are amazing, and they summarize that data in a way that helps us have really good discussions about it. But I would say that we're sort of in the start of our coaches out in the field. So I think this is something that we're going to be exploring as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have, and you'll see me talk about that a little bit later too, the evaluations and looking at outcomes of PD. So we've done that, and we've looked at evaluations following the HQPD rubric. It's really, I think, for us getting content, getting our coaches deep enough trained that they can differentiate on a dime, that we know that when they go out into the field, they're able to answer questions. And this is just one piece of it. The coaching fidelity was the other piece, which we are really, you heard me talk about, it's really been on my mind at the beginning. So this is really where we're getting better at that TOT process and fidelity of training. It's really time consuming when it talks about, does a trainer have a good and comprehensive and deep understanding of a particular topic, and how they're delivering that training to group is really hard.
Well, and I would say for us, our coaches at this point are really heavily into the systems coaching piece.
Mm-hmm.
And we have regional coaches,
Mm-hmm.
only 6 of them throughout the state. And then we have 18 districts that we're working with that are district level coaches.
Mm-hmm.
And those district coaches are more into the instructional practices that the districts are going to be using.
Mm-hmm.
So this year, really, our shift is going to go from systems to instructional practices for LEA coaches, because we felt like everyone needed a baseline in systems instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And it also coordinates with, we've been working to cohere across the agency. And so we're rolling out a comprehensive needs assessment process that includes the tool that basically everyone in the state that gets title funds will align their systems to.
Mm-hmm.
So that's been a big shift in our state. And so our coaches will be intimately involved in that process. So I think our coaches are at a different instructional cascade level than yours right now.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll be looking to you for advice.
Yeah, we've been spending a lot of time at the systems level, and then they train on systems and PBIS and some. We ask a lot of our coaches, actually, Corinne, now that I think about it.
We do.
So then we've really been since we've grown, I should say, to look at, so we've already gotten into this. So really looking at fidelity of this coaching. We've spent a lot of time on fidelity of training and how to develop trainings, and not how to develop trainings, so pretty much developed centrally, but how to deliver them and make sure that content's coming across. But really looking, and we answered this one a little earlier, but how are we measuring coaching effectiveness data? How are we looking at coaching to make sure we're consistent across, and that that we have some fidelity to that plan. And while we're still tweaking the other areas, because every state seems to want to grow as fast as we can expand. So then the last area we're looking for is outcome data. So Corinne, do you want to explain the outcome data that we take?
So this data collection period for us is ongoing right now. It goes from the beginning of May to middle of July with the option of extensions through August. So schools can really enter their data throughout the entire summer before next year starts. This is pretty comprehensive for schools, or cumbersome, I guess is the word I'm looking for schools. It's a lot of info, but it gives us a lot of data. And we immediately provide a report back to the schools that allows them to see some trends within their schools. So we hope it's very useful, and the coaches really use it to work within their coaching plan and how the school is doing. So schools give us 2 instruments. The school profile is student enrollment, and we break it down by gender, ethnicity, race, primary disability type, or in Virginia, we also have a 504 plan. And then we also look at the total student enrollment and see how many students have 0 ODRs, 1 office discipline referral, 2 to 5, 6+. So that's with total student enrollment. But then additionally, the schools give us outcome summary data, which looks across the entire academic year. how many ODRs were there within the school, again disaggregated by gender, ethnicity, race, and disability type. So we have the ability to track how a school is doing year to year with their total number of incidents, but then also how schools are doing with respect to the percentage of the population within each tier. So most students, a majority, we say ideally at least 80% should have just 0 to 1 ODRs and so on. And we can track that yearly to look at good impact data. Then from divisions, we collect level of satisfaction and value of resources survey. Level of satisfaction really looks at the interaction between our coaches and the divisions. And then value of resources are, the best data comes from what resources may they be accessing that we aren't thinking of. So if they're telling us that they're using videos from a good website, we can share that with other people. If they're really not using a resource that they thought they were, then why? And what may be the problem with that, or is it a little bit outdated, stuff like that.
Okay. And then we really, again, like we did with fidelity data, go back to the coaches and use that data to improve learning. So again, our evaluation team reports trends in outcomes to leadership and implementation teams. We've been very mindful of DISPRO data for students with disabilities and our African American students. We try to measure also suspension data, in particular out of school suspension or short-term suspension data that we keep a close eye on, and then school accreditation status. The division reports, again, are given to the coaching pairs to really review and look at, and the same process really happens in that we start to develop or share activities for improving certain aspects of implementation in order to improve outcome, and then consistent areas for growth or topics for capacity building, just like before. So one area we've really been working with them on is how to retrieve or find natural sources of data and use that on a more regular basis. A lot of our coaches were looking to these particular data reports to be handed to them, and that only happens once a year. So how are we looking at natural data sources, either school quality profiles, or something they can access more frequently, but as getting access to division level reports as the division's giving them to schools and so on. So how do we keep a closer eye on that, on the outcomes, and are we able to make quick redirections if necessary? And like we did for fidelity data, if there are certain areas of growth that we're looking for or that are consistent, like I mentioned, the DISPRO or out of school or in school suspensions, how do we bring those up or mention them at networking opportunities, or focus on them for professional learning, or use the pieces that we're talking about in their professional learning for focus? So I don't want to say a newer piece, but something we've looked to start in the fall. We've mentioned it, but haven't, I guess, given the, not, I guess, I know we haven't done explicit instruction with them around comparing fidelity and outcome data. And what does that mean? And so what could we do or script for divisions and coaches when we have high fidelity scores but are still getting low outcomes, or vice versa, or we're not seeing the correlation that we would expect to? What does that mean, and what do we do, and how do we keep an eye on both pieces? So really, we've realized consistently that our coaches need more support around using that data together, and what that could possibly mean. So then, as we mentioned a little earlier, we started looking at expanding that notion of outcomes, and what do we mean by outcomes? But it's not just division level outcomes, but what are the outcomes that we get for trainings, and how are we giving away information that's leading to actionable tasks that improve implementation? So We've done a lot of work around evaluation team coming in and talking to the coaches about what their what their evaluation data means, how that needs to change, what they do next time for a training, or how we might need to design something differently to get better outcomes in terms of what we're looking for. How might misconceptions or confusions lead to coaching tasks, and so on. So we've really spent the last year, I think our evaluation team has done an incredible job of that and really grown what we're able to give away as a state because of it. And so the last thing that we're really working on with our coaches is the development of a data dashboard, if you will, for our divisions. We've always had the divisions make a dashboard of what data is important to them and how they're monitoring it. What we hadn't done as a state is ask the coaches to put together with their division teams a dashboard that might have data indicative of success with implementation, plus targeted outcomes, both targeted outcomes for us, how do we measure success as a project, but targeted outcomes or areas of interest for them as well. And so we started with these dashboards, and we looked at things like school accreditation, our standards of learning test scores to see how they're doing, graduation indicators. We've looked at whether or not schools are focus or priority, whether they're in the results-driven accountability program isn't the right word, but whether they're being looked at by our Office of Special Education Program Improvement for students with disabilities. We've looked at behavior, attendance, and so on. And we have these conversations with the division team, and what we're asking our divisions to do with their coaches, and we've just started this, is how does this data tell us where we might need to phase out or intensify support? So in our previous BDIG, we had X number of divisions. We launched this, MTSS or VTSS work where we had previously done RTI and PBIS separate. Our last BDIG helped us bring it together, and now we have some divisions that are doing really well and don't need from us, or at a place of capacity where they could be really supporting themselves. So this is really the first time the coaches have been asked, and they've built such great relationships. This is a hard conversation for them. So they really are having to say, how do we tier supports, but how do we fade out? And that's been a really hard question for them. So is there anyone else who has had some experience with tiering supports, if you will, for divisions? And what indicators have you used, or how have you done that? Or how do you get coaches to separate from the divisions that they've built relationships with?
Hi, this is Kim. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Well, I don't know that I have an answer, but I had a clarifying question. When you say fade from divisions they support, one, that term division is not as, I don't know, clear for me. For whom do you mean when you're describing divisions? First off. And then secondly, are they fading? I guess I did have a thought that when we do fade supports of RTA delivery from an LEA, we we have a team lead or a contact there, so we try to build a capacity to release, kind of gradual release, like you were saying.
Mm-hmm. Right. So our Virginia calls our LEAs divisions. So it's LEAs or districts or divisions. Those are all synonymous. And yes, we do. We have tried over time and still do. That's our model, that we fade that support, that we have. Generally, we ask not for one person, but a team of people, but ultimately 2 or 3 at that LEA level that are trained fairly deeply, so that we can, from the minute we go in, begin to fade some of our supports as we train. So we do have that model, and still find it, because it's rare that we have people that are paid that's a full-time job for them in Virginia, so they have other responsibilities. So we find that process of building capacity in them slower than we would like, I think, given all of their other responsibilities. And then we, as I'm sure you do too, issues of turnover and so on. So how to build plans, I guess, that help continue to build that capacity across the division and then fade out where it makes sense.
Yeah, and thank you for clarifying, because my challenge with the division concept is we have what we call BOCES, which are kind of regional. We just really, the quickest description is they're regional groups of small districts that get certain supports, specifically often it's special ed services, but a lot of the PD and training within that region comes from that entity. So I wasn't sure if you were kind of describing a regional model or more like a district division, parity. But I definitely understand what you're talking about with turnover and kind of considering for whom you build capacity. Our arm really has moved away from schools. In our former SPDIG, we did a lot more school-based and up. And I think that now our reach is really to follow the cascading logic of district and then the district to support the schools. It's not necessarily been actualized by any means to a level of completion. We just finished year 2 of this. So I know that there's room for that, but I definitely can see, we do end of year constituent surveys, kind of like you're talking about. And I was thinking about some of that data, and I can definitely see how if we just left right now, there would definitely be some holes and some gaps. And so I do believe in fading and finding ways to really kind of try to make sure there are operations and conditions that can be sustainable, but I'm not sure that we have that clear either. So I appreciate your question.
Yeah, we'll work on it together then.
Right. Like I feel like that's what we're all in it for. But
right.
I do think that having the data and the information and getting the feedback. So we have struggled over a few SPDIGs with kind of clarifying our logging experiences, but also and format, kind of finding different ways, but also that input on the constituent work. I think we have some limitations because of PII and other pieces where we're really not requesting from LEAs much right now, like special requests. And so we're kind of working with extant data that we can, capture, that's already captured, that we can use and data mine to a degree, but even more than that, just getting the really specific TA feedback, I think is done at too high a level right now after 2 years. I would almost want it to be more discreet than some of our prompts have been, to get a little bit more at the heart of it. But I think there's potential for that. So that's all.
Thank you. And then we had another idea. We faced this with a couple in the chat box of external coaches who were not fading in the desired manner. Oh, same thing, because they thought the team would not be able to do the job in the same level as them. Exactly. it was a learning experience. And we created a rubric of expectations of the internal team coach and what they should be able to do by the time the implementation phase is closing out. Oh, Corinne, you getting that down? This really helps everyone focus on the goal of fading out to the LEA team coach. So that's a great idea. And I think we're at time, aren't we?
Yes, that's correct. And let me point out, I will keep the space open for a minute more. So if you want to just copy paste any of the input from the chat pod, you're welcome to do that.
Oh, thank you. Yes.
Of course, I want to thank you both for taking the time to put together this presentation, the slide deck, and sharing your work with the group.
Thanks for letting us. We got some great ideas. So.
Well, that makes me happy because that's what this space is for, is the collective is greater than the parts, right?
That's right.
Well, fantastic. Thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. I will send out a follow-up email. It will have the protocol for the program area meeting at the OSEP Directors Conference, as well as a link to this recording if you want to review it again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.